8 years ago, Lund University in Sweden provided a sum of money and invited me to study abroad. During the period, neither lectures nor projects are required, just show you around and let you have a look, feeling like you are eating and drinking. Before I left, I asked a little guiltily, "What do you want to do with so much money to invite me?" A professor told, "We want you to know that there are better systems in the world than the United States. Sweden is a tiny country with a population of only 10 million. How does such a small country have such strong institutional and cultural confidence?" A Swedish prosecutor said, she has been a prosecutor for 32 years and has never accepted a case of official corruption. A policeman said in a lecture, he has been a policeman for more than 20 years, and only encountered one attempt to bribe him. A man from an Eastern European country was pulled over for a driving violation and the driver tried to give him 500 Swedish kronor. The police said, "I dragged him into a police car. He drove illegally and was fined according to the law, but he tried to bribe the police and was sentenced to 2 years in prison." The police said that I would never consider taking bribes, because the wages given to me by the state are enough for me to live decently. I attended a criminal trial. After the trial, I asked a juror, "How do you prevent yourself from being corrupt?" He asked in surprise, "Am I corrupt? How can this be?" I said, "How is it impossible?" He said, "How is it possible?" After a few rounds, he thought about it for a while, and suddenly realized, it is impossible. Before I go to court, I don't know who to try, we form a verdict. He has no chance to bribe. The social background for Swedish officials to be free from corruption is that the people are not greedy for money. Before returning home, I went to the barber shop to get my hair cut. After pushing the door and entering, the female barber asked, "Have you made an appointment?" I asked depressedly, "I still need to make an appointment for a haircut?" She checked the small book and said that there is still a place in the afternoon the day after tomorrow, so you can come. I didn't know until after the haircut that the most common haircut cost more than 300 yuan. But even with such a lucrative business, people stop work at 4 p.m. and never work overtime. Once I chatted with the head of the Oriental Department of Lund University. He worked in China for many years during the Cultural Revolution. I said, "The boss of your Volvo should be rich." He said the guy was immoral. I asked in surprise, "What?" He said, "It is immoral for him to be so rich." Only then did I realize that there is still such a moral view in the world, being too rich is immoral. I don't know if his morals are common among Swedes. But the Swedes do not love property and love nature, which is a common social sentiment. About a year ago, I invited people from the Swedish embassy to give lectures on socialism at the University of Political Science and Law. A female staff member named Mayan who chatted with me, "I drive a nice car in Sweden, like a thief, for fear of being seen by others." Swedes change cars, usually with the same make and model as before, so that neighbors can't see that you have changed cars. In my opinion, there are several main reasons why the Swedish people do not love money, and the custom of officials not accepting bribes can be formed. First, the comprehensive social welfare and insurance system makes the people feel calm and fearless. No money is needed for schooling, no money for pension, and basically no money for medical treatment. People don't have to prepare for war and famine, for birth, old age, sickness, and death, and work hard. Second, the tax rate in Sweden has reached more than 40%, and the heavy tax makes the people lose the motivation to pursue wealth. Third, government affairs are open. The transparency of government affairs in Sweden is beyond our imagination. It is natural for officials to disclose their property. The Prime Minister treats guests to dinner, and the menu needs to be online. French President Jacques Chirac once called the Swedish Prime Minister to accuse the Swedes who opposed joining the Eurozone, and this letter was made public. Chirac was very angry and wrote to the Prime Minister of Sweden again, asking why the private letter was made public. As a result, the letter was made public again. Because according to Swedish law, these are the categories of government affairs disclosure. Fourth, the society is transparent. Not only public servants must disclose their assets, but also corporate executives. According to Sweden's real estate registration system, anyone who buys a house locally must publish an advertisement, including the location of the house, transaction time, names of both buyers and sellers, transaction price, house area, and construction conditions, etc. Such advertisements do not serve any commercial purpose, but are merely for inquiries by current or future persons who are interested in knowing the property status of the home buyer. Fifth, the folk customs are simple. The Swedish folk customs do not advocate individual excellence, but advocating natural simplicity. Enterprises do not advocate overtime. A person who often works overtime will be regarded as a person with ulterior motives. In a country that loves nature more than wealth, what is official corruption for? Conversely, in a country where money is paramount, how can officials not be corrupt? Paradoxically, this unhurried, leisurely and natural country is actually one of the most competitive countries in the world. After returning from Sweden, whenever I met some hard-working and corrupt high-ranking people from Shangguo, I thought of that tiny country thousands of miles away, and bowed my head in shame. I criticized the American judicial system 20 years ago, but I can't do it alone in China. Why have so many elites in Chinese academic circles failed to discover the truth about American justice? They are perfectly capable, but fail to discover a real problem. One of the reasons, I think, is that they want to use the United States in the text of the Constitution or the United States in the judgment of the Supreme Court to transform China. They have such a kind wish to publicize the U.S. Constitution and judicial texts, so as to guide people to learn from the U.S. humbly and build a beautiful China. But these scholars seldom study American prisons, American grassroots justice, or the truth of American justice. Whether you study China or the United States, I suggest that you first study the prisons of a country. Only by studying the prisons in this country can we know the truth about this country. If you go to the hospital, the doctor will test the urine and stool first, and look at the excrement first. Prison is the excretory system of a society, from which you can see the disease of this society. Where is the good now? This time the epidemic made the Chinese suddenly discover that there are so many problems in the United States. We just talked about the judicial issues in the United States. In fact, the medical insurance issues in the United States are more complicated and the fees are confusing. Their prices can be negotiated. How much is this treatment? $300. I really don't have any money. Then $200. I still can't help it. Then give me $80. It's the same as we buy vegetables in the vegetable market. So at this time, we take this opportunity to speak out about the issue of American justice and explain it clearly to everyone. The reason why I urgently talk about the problems in the United States is also because I see the problems in the United States being repeated in China. For example, Zhang Jun, Chief Procurator of the Supreme Procuratorate, said that in the past 20 years, the procuratorial organs have reviewed and prosecuted criminal offenses from 824,000 in 1999 to 2.2 million in 2019. What to do when the Procuratorate is under a lot of pressure to handle the case? Then bring in the American system of pleading guilty and accepting punishment. The correct way of thinking should be to reduce the 2.2 million prosecutions to 804,000. According to the research of demographer Yi Fuxian, from 2009 to 2019, the total population of our country only increased by 30 million, while the number of prosecutions nearly tripled. Have our people gone bad, or has our way of enforcing law gone wrong? We should use more civil law to regulate the country, use administrative law to regulate the country, and use the public security management punishment law instead of criminal law to regulate. There are 50,000 people in prisons in Japan, and the population of our country is 10 times that of Japan. Multiplied by 10 times, there should be about 500,000 people in our prisons, but now there are 1.7 million people in our prisons, and there may be more than that. The United States is even more exaggerated, and the prison population ratio is 4 times that of our country. In the past few years, we have been studying the United States, and a large number of prisons and detention centers have been expanded in various places. I look very anxious. Don't feel like you have nothing to do with yourself. Because your relatives and classmates are likely to be on their way to prison. I'm working on a case now, the boyfriend of a girl from our faculty of law. After graduating from the University of Petroleum, I worked in a P2P company for 2 or 3 years, with a total salary and bonus of about 1 million for technology development. Got caught this time. A total of more than 600 people were filed in this case. What is even more unexpected is that this case was classified as gang-related, and my client was identified as the main participant. Now there are probably 4 or 5 charges, including homicide. Because their P2P company is looking for other companies to press for loans, and other companies may kill people when they are calling for debts, and he doesn't know these things at all. Once the case is classified as gang-related, the main participants are responsible for the entire case. One of our children, whose parents have trained him for so many years, was arrested for doing technology development in a company, and his life may be ruined. At the beginning, P2P was encouraged by the national government. Now the board hits the people in the ass and it's so heavy. Therefore, we must be alert to the problem of crime expansion. The attack surface should be narrow, and the unity surface should be wide. Once crimes expand, once they become the norm, we or those around us must be victimized. Either yourself, or your relatives and friends, or your descendants. The problem of the expansion of crime in the United States is very serious now. I wrote an article that focused on the problem of police misuse of guns in the United States. According to surveys, the American police probably kill more than 1,000 people a year on the streets. The population of the United States is more than 300 million, and the population of China is 4 times that, which is equivalent to our police killing more than 4,000 people on the street a year, and killing more than a dozen people on the street every day on average. Now many people advocate learning from the United States, and we are constantly strengthening the authority of the police. Now our police are very strong, which is also the result of learning from the United States. I don't have a good impression of American police. I was at a subway station in New York, and I didn't know the way, so I asked the police. In China, if you don't know the way, it's okay to ask the police, and the police will definitely tell you with a good attitude. At this point, we still have good trust in the police. When the police in the United States heard me asking for directions, they said very disdainfully that it had nothing to do with me. He thinks he is a master. This is a thing I have personally experienced. Therefore, we must be highly vigilant against the problems of the American police. They kill more than 1,000 people a year, but 98% of the police will not be held accountable for this. Just now Dr. Guo Hang talked about plea bargaining in American misdemeanor cases. In fact, it is the same in American felony cases. First of all, the prosecutor convicts you of 4 or 5 charges and asks if you plead guilty. A study on drug-related crimes shows that the average time for those who plead guilty and accept punishment is 3 years. As long as you request a court trial and confront the prosecutor, the average is 13 years, and the average is 10 years more. Therefore, in the felony cases in the United States, the defendants surrendered one after another and did not dare to ask for a trial. In the United States, the proportion of felony cases in court is 3%, which is exactly the same as that of misdemeanor cases. Chairman Xi asked to carry forward the Feng Qiao experience. I think that up to now our political and legal system has not implemented and learned this spirit well. The essence of the Feng Qiao experience is that disputes should be resolved among the people, and disputes should be resolved administratively, rather than expanding crimes or centralizing the judiciary. Disputes should mainly be resolved administratively. In our country, criminal jurists can no longer add more, and they write charges when they have nothing to do. The greatest achievement of a criminal jurist is that I wrote a certain law. A country cannot have too many jurists, nor can it have too many lawyers. We now regard lawyers as jobs and develop as an industry, and we encourage everyone to do internships without taking the judicial qualification. This is very dangerous. Severe penalty doctrine is not our country's tradition, nor is judicial centrism. Our country's tradition is administrative centralism and light punishment. Our country has always talked about governing the world, and there is a standard to measure whether a dynasty is prosperous or not, which is called jail and emptiness. Jail is an ancient prison. Whether it is a prosperous age depends on how many people are locked in the prison. If there are many people in the prison, it cannot be a prosperous age. So the United States is not a prosperous world, nor is it governing the world. In this confrontation between China and the United States, I am firmly optimistic about China. This is not to say that there are no problems with our system, but that there is a big problem with the American system. The United States wants to change, but can't. At that time, Bush Sr. talked about judicial reform, but he couldn't change it, because the more than 1 million lawyers in the United States had vested interests. There are problems with the constitutional structure and constitutional system of the United States. I think the Chinese Communist Party is right when it proposes to stick to the road of socialism with Chinese characteristics. What are Chinese characteristics? We must consider the characteristics of China. First, China has a population of 1.3 billion, which is a major feature of China. Second, thousands of years of tradition. Third, great social mobility and great integration. You college students, who have come to Beijing from all directions, may not go home. Most Chinese students are like this now. This is the current Chinese characteristic. Under such circumstances, if we only study Britain and the United States and eat them alive, we may have big problems. So I have been saying that we have to examine the Japanese system, learn from Japan and learn from Northern Europe. Which country do you choose to study in? First look at the prisons in that country. I studied American prisons, and I said that this country is not good. I went to Northern Europe and Japan to see prisons. American prisons are nothing compared to that. As I said just now, there should not be too many lawyers in our country, and we must not make a great leap forward in the lawyer team. The problem in the United States is that there are too many lawyers. The United States has the largest number of lawyers in the world, with 1.3 million. The population of China is 4 times that, which means that China has more than 5.2 million lawyers. We now have 470,000 lawyers, and it is said that the standard set by the Ministry of Justice is to reach 1 million lawyers by 2030. This is troublesome. Once the number of lawyers increases, it will be difficult not to decrease in the future. At present, this issue is really urgent. There are 30,000 lawyers in Japan, which is equivalent to 300,000 lawyers in my country. There are now 470,000 people in our country, and we still need to reserve some quota for the transfer of judges and prosecutors. There isn't much room left for the total.